like to thank you, our clients, industry leaders, and public officials for attending today's reception. We value the working relationship we have with you, and we appreciate the opportunity to serve as your real estate advisor. This year marks a change in our market data reporting style and strategy. We're no longer producing a single booklet that has contained industry sector information. Instead, the folder in front of you today that you've received contains separate Q1 2018 office, industrial, retail, and multifamily market view reports. For the past 21 years, and for decades to come, our goal with the delivery of this information is to place you in a position of advantage so that you may make the best real estate decisions and create superior outcomes for your clients and customers. Today's event will feature a panel discussion focusing on current market conditions, trends to watch, and perspectives for the future. In advance of the panel taking the stage, I'd like to introduce our associates. Rick Tollickson, President and CEO of Hubbell Realty Company. Jan Berg, Corey Birkenholtz, Max Colby, Tom DeWay, Michelle Drummer, David Eckley, Arnie Ingman, Cy Fox, Marty Herman, Riley Hogan, TJ Jacobs, Colleen Johnson, Craig King, Maury Knudsen, Rick Krause, Harrison Cruzy, John Ladinsky, Kermit Marsh, Josh Masters, Todd Malang, Aiden Navarovich, Chris Pendroy, Dick Powell, Tim Sharp, Jeff Spence, Paul Weeks, and Nigel Worth. The panelists for today's discussion are Tyler Dingle, Linda Gibbs, Ryan Jensen, and Bill Wright. And I'm honored to announce that Bill recently took an additional role as managing director with our firm. Today's discussion will be moderated by Chris Konetsky. Chris is the publisher of the Business Record. Prior to taking the publisher role, Chris held positions as staff writer and editor. He is an Iowa State graduate, a Chicago native, and loves all things Chi-Town sports, except maybe the White Sox. He did a one-year stint as editor and social media manager for ESPN's College Game Day website. And in an industry that is constantly evolving, Chris, along with his team, have done an incredible job raising the bar for both quality and ever-expanding products to better serve our local business community. Chris is in touch with and passionate about Des Moines business, and we are privileged to have him lead our discussion today. Please welcome Chris and our panelists to the stage.
Good evening. I've been told that we have about 50 minutes and we are what stands between you and drinks out in the lobby. So we're going to try to keep this nice and quick and fast going today and delve a little bit into the numbers. So to do that, why don't we go, let's go ahead and start things off. You each have had a chance to digest and look through each of the numbers. I wonder if you could each start off and talk to us a little bit about what's one major takeaway that you found in the numbers, and then go ahead and start with you.
Thank you. In regards to the office market, which I think I'm here to talk about this evening, is one of the takeaways is I think 2017, when you look at there was a lot of movement in the central business district downtown, but a lot of movement between buildings and more activity than we've seen in many years, in recent years. But it really didn't move the needle in terms of absorption or vacancy, yet there was a lot of activity downtown. The real momentum continues to be out in the western suburbs, and we're now starting in the office market, starting to see some growth in the Class A market, in the Ankeny market as well, which is a kind of a new phenomenon that we could spend some time talking about. But there's a lot of the absorption was really focused in the western suburbs, and there's still a lot of tenant interest in the western suburbs. And what that's led, and I think the big takeaway is we've seen tenants migrate from some Class B buildings, Class C, B buildings to some nicer Class A buildings. And what's happened is we're now seeing some new construction to try to fill some additional demand.
Okay. Tyler?
Well, I don't know, I mean, know how much time Kyle puts into the survey, so he might not appreciate me saying this, but I think the takeaway I would have is that the numbers in front of you are really just a snapshot of what is there today. What it doesn't take into account necessarily is what is coming down the road. So I think you need to kind of take some of that in perspective, and I think that's hopefully some of the color that we're going to add here today is kind of what's that upcoming. If you look at, for example, in the retail sector, if you look at that big box vacancy number dropping all the way down to 2%, from an outside perspective, that looks pretty attractive. What it doesn't account for is the fact that Babies R Us is going to be vacating the market, Kmart is going to be vacating the market. So we're going to see some changes, I think, in the next 6 to 12 months, and I think we're going to touch on some of those a little bit further up here today. But as you all know, real estate's an ever-shifting and ever-moving market, and this snapshot will help, contain what has happened in the past, looking forward to today, and hopefully we can give you a glimpse on what's going to come down the road.
Focus totally on investment properties, and we look at not only what's happening locally, but nationally as well. And the thing that we found pretty fascinating this year was that the national sales in all asset types, the total volume sales volume was down 7% nationally. But locally, our total sales volume was up 38%. And we've never seen anything quite like that before, and we'll talk more about it later.
Yeah, I agree with Tyler's initial thoughts on the market. What we have as a snapshot as it relates to multifamily. I think that there were quite a few units delivered last year, not as many as what we anticipated. Some fell into this coming year, but the needle didn't move all that much as in terms of overall vacancy rates. I think we'll see that maybe go a little different direction this year, maybe some downward pressure on rents, but overall a lot of developments in the multifamily arena, and we'll talk more about what's going to happen here in 2018.
So this is my 21st year doing this, and the great thing about Des Moines is consistency and the resiliency of the marketplace. We're in a market that is the fastest growing Midwest market compared to our peers. Minneapolis, Omaha, Kansas City, St. Louis. We're outpacing those other cities in terms of growth, and our unemployment rate is very low, yet we're growing jobs each year, and that simply trickles down to our market, and you're seeing those in the stability of the results in these surveys. With our vacancy rates fairly stable in just about all sectors. Multifamily's got some supply side coming. We'll talk about that. But generally, what I'm not shocked about, but is actually quite comforting, is that the market is pretty stable, consistent, and fairly resilient because of our increase in population, because of our consistent job growth.
You talked a little bit about the multifamily components, and it's ticked up overall for the metro to about 6.7 for the vacancy, and that's from I believe about 5.2-ish, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about what's maybe driving that, and maybe what we might expect for going forward?
Well, with the stable market that you see, with the demographic improvements, with the job growth, is a great story. So with that comes developers. From outside the market, inside the market, they look at Des Moines and see it as a very stable place to invest. We have occupancy levels that are 5.3, which is healthy, actually quite stable. So it's a market that is ripe for development. From developers from outside the market or here. So you're seeing, and there's financing available for multifamily development. So you're seeing the effects of that today. Something like 3,100 units under construction that will be delivered in 2018 and the first half of 2019. How that will be absorbed, we can talk about. There's the growth story in Des Moines is what's driving that multifamily development.
And I think you need to look at it as just a temporary market imbalance. And as Kyle was saying, it's going to level out. In 2004, our vacancy rate was 9.4% overall. And that was due to the lending practices and the fact that loans were readily available, low interest rates, and a lot of people were moving out of apartments buy homes. And, it took a while for the vacancy to drop back down to what we would consider a normal level. Anywhere from 5 to 6% is really normal, we would consider normal.
I would think as the market, we see that the market on the supply side, from the developer's pipeline standpoint, will start to slow down. So we're going to absorb these new units, assuming we continue the growth trend that we're on. We believe that we will absorb these units and the market will start to tighten or stabilize, in 2020, 2021. But there'll be a little patch here the next 2 years or so. We'll probably see a bump and increase in vacancy rates. There'll be a little bit of strain on economic occupancies, but it's not a situation where it's terribly abnormal or significantly out of bounds.
If we had, we added about 9,000 jobs in Metro last year. We do that again, and if we have the predicted interest rate rises that we may see later this year, our inventory is fine except for a couple pockets.
Looking at the numbers, it looks like rents have relatively leveled out this year. What other type of effects might that increased supply have on apartment owners?
We're already seeing increased concessions in the new construction, particularly in the suburbs and in the central business district. I think we'll continue to see those. I think they'll get a little more aggressive, particularly going here into the spring. Areas like Grimes, where there's 400 units maybe coming online this year in a pretty small market, are going to have some pressure. So all those things will continue and slow down as we stabilize.
And the other thing that needs to be pointed out is the Class B properties. They're the ones that are really being hurt with the new development, with the concessions that are being given and the rents where they're at. The tenants in the Class B properties can move up to A, at least temporarily. And so we're seeing quite a bit of vacancy in the B properties, and landlords telling us that they're having to reduce the rents pretty substantially.
Particularly those that haven't put any, a lot of landlords have just ridden the rent increase wave of 3 to 8% for the last 5-6 years. And those landlords in the Class B sector who haven't improved their properties at all, those are the guys who are going to struggle. That's probably where some opportunities come for investors in our market over the next 12 to 18 months.
In the central business district, that was the highest one of the different markets that you're looking at. Does that surprise you at all? Or is that just from obviously there's a lot of buzz around downtown. I'm just curious if you almost think that some of the western suburbs or some of the eastern suburbs would have actually felt more of that.
The jobs, the job growth, a lot of it is in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And the suburbs is desirable. We don't have, I think we talked about this a little bit last year, we don't have an hour and a half commute to get downtown. You can get downtown in 20 minutes pretty much anywhere in the metro. So the rents downtown are really the driving factor to vacancy issues you're going to have. Some of these new construction projects have rents that are $235 a square foot. Comparing that to something in the suburbs, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
And if you look at the difference between the rents of the 3 bedrooms in the western suburbs versus downtown, there's about $1,000 a month difference, and that's obviously pretty significant.
Tyler, I wonder from the retail standpoint, when you're looking at what's happening in the multifamily, does that affect any of your outlook as you start looking forward on retail projects?
Yeah, retailers track demographics. They look at rooftops, jobs, daytime population, household income levels. So, the question I get a lot of times is, how do we get these national retailers downtown? And I think if you look downtown, I think if you look at our population downtown, it's probably the size of what's Norwalk, Billy?
12,000.
So, all of downtown would be similar to the size of Norwalk. So, how do we get these national groups, you name the brand, to move to Norwalk? It's just the population density is not there. And a lot of these nationals are attracted to, you see this in our survey, attracted to Jordan Creek area, because that's able to pull more than just metro-wide, but it pulls really from a 2-hour drive range. Halfway to Omaha, those folks will come to Des Moines, go up north towards Mason City and south towards KC. And So you got that 2-hour drive where they're able to pull, and if they're going to drop a single store in our market, as you've seen many of these do with Nordstrom racks and big sporting goods and Shields, they're going to look at, okay, where's my bang for the buck at? Where am I going to have the most visibility to the market?
I would add in East Village, I mean, the West Elm get for the East Village and what that developed, I mean, that's a huge get.
Yeah.
I mean, to get that kind of retailer in downtown Des Moines is phenomenal. The question is how many more of those are going to be able to fill behind. I think a lot of times, those types of downtown markets, they're really focused. From a retail perspective, your restaurants, bars, and then your kind of niche retailers that are a lot of times serve just a real specific niche. And East Village has done a great job of doing that.
And I would guess that much will depend upon the success that West Elm has. And if they do well, then that may very well attract some more retailers to the downtown area.
I mean, that metric that what that development group created for West Elm really fit within what they look for, within their criteria. And there's not a lot of West Elms out there. So they did a fantastic job getting into the market. I think they'll do well there. And anytime you can that national tenant will create others, but I think it'll be a slow and steady growth.
So you alluded to a couple of examples, Babies R Us, and what might be happening on that front, especially in the big box. Could you expand a little bit into what you might be seeing coming that wouldn't be reflected necessarily in the survey?
Well, I don't think it's a secret that, again, the big buzzword in retail is this omni-channel retailing, where retailers are trying to figure out that mix of how do I have the online presence, the mobile presence, the sticks and bricks, that brick and mortar presence, and how do I have all of those aspects of my retailing work together. So groups are trying to figure that out. I think what you're going to see is that a lot of these bigger box groups are going to continue to shrink their footprint. That's going to bring some of that space back in the market. Space that, quite frankly, just due to the layouts of buildings like that, the depths of those buildings, if you have a 50,000 square foot tenant get back 10,000 feet, that becomes a difficult space to fill. So you're going to see landlords who have to be creative in filling those spaces. The other thing that we're seeing is that, as consumers are spending less time in department stores and shopping for those soft goods, they're looking to spend more time and money on that entertainment aspect. So we're seeing, you've seen movie theaters popping up, you've seen bowling concepts popping up. You look at anything what they're doing, Waukees doing the same thing. But behind them that I think are going to be new to the market with an entertainment concept that they're going to introduce out there that will be a game changer for that landscape. So those entertainment uses that will bring the consumer to the mall, to the retail area, and not only bring them there, but keep them there for an extended period, so it's not just a drop-in shop and go, but so that they're frequenting and patroning all of the other retailers. That's really what those areas need to survive.
And you see a lot of articles that say that retail is dead, it's a dying field, primarily because of what is happening with e-commerce and online shopping. But what's really happening is the dynamics are changing. It's not dead, it's not the demise, it's just the dynamics are changing totally. We have major regional mall owners around the country looking at putting into their malls what they call pop-up stores. And they're permanent spaces, but they range anywhere from 20 to 200 square feet. And the idea is for those online retailers to get experience what buyers are looking for, to touch and feel the product, to get the word out about the product, and be in what they would consider a temporary space, although they look like permanent locations. And from a mall standpoint, owner standpoint, they want to get those tenants in there on a temporary basis, and with the idea that hopefully they'll get enough of a response that they'll want to open a permanent location within the mall. So it's advantageous for both parties.
Bill, Tyler, question on the retail front, and hopefully I'm not stealing a question from you, but I see a lot of what happened in 06, 07. We had rents in these neighborhood centers that were reaching, at that point in time, the highest levels ever of 18 to 22 bucks a foot, somewhere in that range, Ridgewood Plazas of the world, et cetera. Do you think that these neighborhood retail rents that are, $25 to $31 a foot are those sustainable rents if we have any change in employment or any shift in the market?
Really?
Hey, I promise I wouldn't ask any tough questions, but I didn't.
I'll try first. For prime A locations, they're absolutely sustainable. I mean, we have rents in the Jordan Creek, Ankeny corridor. We have rents in our marketplace right now that are mid-30s, approaching rents that start with 4, okay? It's happening, especially if it's an end cap and it's a restaurant. I mean, a potential restaurant location. Maybe it's got a drive-through, maybe it's got a patio. It's happening. I mean, there's $30 and $40 rents out there. And it's sustainable, yes, in prime A locations. What happens is, as residential areas develop, office parks develop, and sometimes those premium retail areas, they change. I have a client that owns a building at 22nd and West Town Parkway. When he built Crossroads Shopping Center, it was the corner in West Des Moines. Would you all call that East West Des Moines now? I don't know what you call that, but I mean, clearly, sometimes it does change and those prime corners change. But I think with the cost of new construction and with what, let's be frank, with what tenants demand nowadays in terms of TI packages and their landlord shell delivery isn't a white box anymore. It's a white box plus souped up electric plus souped up HVAC plus, I mean, it's a laundry list of things. So with the increased costs and sometimes the changes, what happens is some of those prime corners over time, if they lose a little bit of their luster, they're absolutely gonna settle back down to the mid-teen rents and $14, $15 rents.
And the other thing that we're seeing is that in those locations that were superior locations and now they are not considered superior, what's happening on the re-tenanting side is looking for other uses, not strictly retail, but more service-oriented uses to fill those spaces.
We've heard that even some of those retail spaces are being used for some office type stuff, kind of industrial, small manufactured types that put a bay door in on the back side of it. It's kind of interesting.
There's a big disconnect between the type of retail that Ryan's talking about, those high rents and office bay, or even sometimes medical. When you look at supply, the amount of supply of these new retail centers that have been brought to the market, it's really a pretty small percentage of the overall market. So as Bill's right. As the suburbs continue to grow, again, I look at Waukee and Ankeny, I look at what's happening around Alice's and Hickman. That's going to spread. That's going to increase the amount of supply. I think the bigger thing to look at is I think the tenants that are filling these spot, a lot of it's restaurants, so a lot of that's, it's not something you can get online, so I think that piece is sustainable. I think what's going to be interesting, and Bill touched on, is you've got a massive amount of TI, tenant improvement allowance, that's put into these buildings up front. So when these tenants roll at the end of their lease term, and they're paying $32 a square foot, but they had $40 a square foot baked into that number in TI, what does that renegotiation look like? Do they come back and say, hey, I paid back my TI allowance for the last 10 years, now I need it to be at $22 a square foot? So that'd be from a tenant perspective. From a landlord perspective, they're probably gonna say, well, that's great, but construction costs have now increased 25% over the last 10 years, and you can vacate if you want, but you're not gonna find this type of space that's built out exactly for you. So there's that influence. I'm seeing that a lot even, there's a lot of great corners. I was working on one this afternoon that's right off of Hickman and right near the interstate. That it was a 10-year lease that was rolling. It's still a prime retail area. But how do we negotiate? I can negotiate back out that TI that was put into the deal. But if I relocate them to another center, then you gotta fight that battle again. So it's the construction costs are a big impact on driving those rents.
I think that's a good segue into construction costs. Is one of I wonder if we could talk a little bit about how you're seeing the effect of construction costs across the variety of the industries, and maybe what some of the effects have been on that side.
Well, on the retail end, I mean, construction costs, of course, have increased in every tenant improvement we've seen. We seem to price out. I mean, the days of $10, $15 TIs seem to be long gone. It's rare when you can do that. So, we see TI, you bid out a tenant improvement project, it's not uncommon to see, $25 to $50 a square foot to get a space ready for a tenant. So in the retail world, I like when from a landlord agency representative side of the business, you want to see the tenant have skin in the game. I know turnkey is more common in the office industry a little bit, but in the retail side, you're not always dealing with a national retailer. I mean, there's fewer and fewer national retailers that are doing business, what I call in neighborhood and community centers, because they're tending to do less stores, smaller stores, and as Tyler mentioned, they're out in the Jordan Creek area, or they're on Delaware Avenue in Ankeny or something, Parade Trail or something. So you're dealing with usually local to regional credit, and your hope is you're trying to negotiate a situation where a landlord's making a contribution, but your hope the tenant's making a contribution as well.
And I think a lot of people don't realize why the costs are going up as much as they are. But when you look back to 2017, the 3 major hurricanes that hit, it's going to take several years for those areas to bounce back again. And they're pulling a lot of supplies and a lot of labor, and that's contributing to the additional costs. And one expert was suggesting that the costs in 2018 will be double what they were in 2017 across the board. So that's very significant. And that falls into another area of affordable housing, which there's a shortage of that all across the country. And when you look at these construction costs, you can't afford to build them. In 1986, there were a number, the average was about 30% of the people, 30% of their income were in affordable housing. And by 2010, that number had increased up to, they were paying 50% of their income. And that dramatically dropped the number of units that were available for low-income families, and so that continues to be a major problem.
Labor as well, right? I mean, just our unemployment rate at 2.8%. The data centers, I imagine, are pulling.
It went down 0.2% since we started this
conversation. Do you want to work for the business director? So I wonder on a couple of those factors, if there are some things that would cause some hesitation or some pause for you, what are some of those things that maybe would keep you up as you're thinking about it as this year goes forward?
Well, I'll just quickly mention on the apartment side with the construction costs. I mean, it directly impacts the rents one, but not only do you have increased construction costs, you have increased kind of tenant demand of what they want for finishes. So also product type. But I think you're seeing coming out of some of these higher construction costs is you're seeing some different product being built. When's the last time you saw a brick town built where you had 60 plus units in one building? There's efficiencies to developing multifamily different ways. And so I think you'll continue to see the product type evolve a little bit if these construction costs stay where they're at or continue to increase.
I might also comment on the construction costs on the industrial side. It's not as big a focus as some of the other sectors, still a very important component. But when you look at the industrial side, 50% of the cost is in transportation. So location is extremely important. Labor force is your next cost. Then occupier cost or occupancy cost is about 5% of a distributor's overall cost. So they make those decisions around their transportation, their location, and then comes into play the specialization of their space, how they stack and pack, how they distribute most efficiently. Those are where the investments come in the industrial side, not so much in the sticks and bricks of the 32-foot clear. Components of the actual real estate are important. Location, access to transportation, more so.
From the employment side, it's twofold. I guess from a retail perspective, it is a challenge. I mean, I don't think you can drive through a restaurant, like a fast food restaurant, and not see the help wanted sign up, or even the advertised $13 an hour. There's some headwinds to the great recovery we've been on. One of those is that unemployment rate, and then as they continue to have to bump those wages, inflation starts to become a little bit of a concern as well. Take it to the kind of the office level, and then get that competition for jobs. Not only is our wages having to increase to compete, but the space, the office space itself is changing in order to go after and both retain and attract new employees. So there is definitely a war for workers out there, and those office users are getting with the wages. They want the coolest, funky space they can find, from basketball courts to foosball to bocce ball to they want to basically bring a person's outside life as part of the workforce. They want to be known as a place that people really want to work, because that's how they attract and retain that high quality talent.
So I think in the office segment, the Class B had experienced the highest increase in my vacancies and my occupancies confused, but the occupancy was had the hardest time refilling that space from things like ARAG and Come and Go. It's going to be moving Federal Home Loan Bank. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what's been driving that, and I assume some of that is exactly that, looking for newer, nicer space, but I assume that's going to have a long-term effect too.
A lot of it is just finding, as to what everyone's been talking about, employees are demanding more from their office space, so companies recognize that, and we're in a growing market, so they've gone out and built new office buildings. Sometimes they're owner occupied, sometimes they're leasing them long term. Holmes Murphy, those kinds, Come and Go's building downtown. We've seen a lot of that in this market. When you look at the Des Moines market, that's not a bad thing. I mean, we don't have this enormous amount of supply that everyone needs to be, watch out, scared about. But it's actually a good thing, because we historically, in the past, Kyle, 5-10 years, we haven't had a lot of big blocks of office space available. If you're a 25,000 foot user, you're out in the marketplace, you might have, 3, 4, 5 options. I think this year, 2018, 2019, you're going to have 10 options. And that's exciting for us in the business, because there's more opportunity out there. Now, to fill that space up, I'm going to go right back to Tyler's point and what everyone's talking about, it's unemployment. I mean, those companies need to hire, to keep growth going, you got to hire more employees to get into newer office space, and it's just a general, a lot of times you got C tenants moving to B buildings, B tenants moving to A buildings. And it's a good time in our marketplace, because people are trying to get better. As far as the B market goes and the office building, clearly the landlords that are going to do best are those landlords that continue to reinvest in their space. Sometimes physical limitations are such that you just can't go out and do everything. You can't build the conference room, do the fitness center, do a rooftop patio, do it all at once. Sometimes that's some of the newer buildings have. But you got to update your common areas. You got to be thinking about what additional things you can do that would improve the tenant experience. And the B buildings are doing that. And you mentioned ARAG downtown. I mean, there's an example of a landlord that clearly recognized that, and they made some incredible improvements to the financial center, to the partnership building, to the 500 grand building. And they're reaping some reward from it.
The challenge that the suburban office owners have is, how do they get those workers and how do they attract them, like you're saying? And the technology that they demand in the open air and co-working environment requires a lot of dollars. And so it's obviously a problem that they need to deal with.
Bill, when you mentioned all these amenities, the rooftop patio, fitness center, break rooms, I thought you were plugging 1963 Bell. Not every landlord can do all that, but Bell did.
Yes.
Bill just signed a big lease at IMT down at Bell Avenue, so let's give it a
Wasn't
try.
IMT.
Oh, not IMT.
It was IFA.
IMT, IFA.
IMT's building a new building out.
That's right, that's right. That was Jan's deal. IMT deal.
Would you expect to continue to see businesses looking to improve their spaces in 2018?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a war for talent. So we keep coming back to that, but employers have to reinvest in their space. They have to reinvest in their employee experience, and office space is part of that process. And you're seeing it across the board. IMT, Holmes Murphy, ARA, Principal, huge investment, nationwide. The list goes on and on. And it's not just large employers. It's smaller groups as well. Each time they have opportunity to enter the marketplace and enter into a new lease, They're looking at how they invest in their organization, how they attract talent and keep talent. R&R Realty Group is a classic example. They're under construction. They'll be complete with what I would classify as top of the market, Class A office space, fully amenitized, top of the market pricing. But they're going after that employer that wants that experience for their employees and is willing to pay for it. As I mentioned, similar to industrial, the rent, the occupancy cost is just a small portion of that employer's overall budget. And so they're looking at retention, attraction can be very costly if you're not competitive. So we're seeing that across the board in the marketplace. R&R Realty Group has recognized that, and they're putting up what I consider to be a very, very competitive property with tons of amenities. We'll see how the market reacts to it. It's going to be top dollar, but I believe that there are those employers out there that will invest in that type of space.
Do you think we'll see some more new office building?
Well, you are. I mean, with you have Westfield, you have R&R's announced two-phase, 90,000 feet over 2 phases at 121st and Meredith. Ankeny, you're seeing some construction at Parade Trail, so you are. If we continue to see the employment growth, I think it's going to continue. Now, we do have some blocks coming on, like I mentioned earlier, in 18 and 19, that might change, might have somebody give it a second thought because they're like, well, we are competing over here also. But one thing I wanted to tag on to Kyle's point, which is a great one, is what's really impressive about some of the landlords in Des Moines, and he mentioned one, is that they're coming into spaces that are vacated by tenants. And I've been in this 25 years, and when I got into this, it was rare that a landlord would ever tear out existing improvements. But you have a lot of landlords now that come in, they look at a space, and maybe it's got perimeter offices, and they know that that's not what tenants are looking for nowadays, and they go and they just rip it out. They're ripping out improvements, and they're cleaning out, making it shell and starting over. And 9 out of 10 times, I think tenants are loving that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we see that a lot. It's definitely changed. And again, with the fact that workplace is such an important piece of their recruitment, is they want to be able to visualize it when they walk in. And if there's walls up and the ceiling grid doesn't match and it looks dingy or dark, they rule it out just before they get very far in. So that's definitely we're seeing that a lot, and it feels, from a landlord's perspective, it feels like whether these can be even used. I think we see a majority of the time that they're not, or the majority of them are not. If they have exterior window or exterior offices, you might leave those in, but a lot of it's just clearing it out and opening it up. Now, I wanted to touch on Kyle's point with R&R. They are building a fantastic building. I think what's going to be interesting to watch is how that building is received by the market. It's going to be a fantastic building that competes for space. There's been a lot of great buildings built. You can go down the list of Holmes Murphy and what IMT's doing, what Commongo's doing, but this is going to be one that's specifically for third-party occupied tenants. What's interesting about it is the rents on this building are going to be in the low 20s net. So we're looking $22, $23, $24 a square foot net, which is $6 above where some of the highs that we've seen. So it's a major price tag, and it's going to come with it a lot of nice amenities. But it'll be interesting to see how that's absorbed and what effect that has on some of the other Class A buildings if they're able to rise their ship along that tide.
What was interesting nationally in office investment sales, the suburban offices outpaced the CBD across the country nationally, which we've never seen that before. And maybe part is due to the fact that you get better yields and cap rates are higher suburban versus CBD. We probably won't see that in our market just because of the fact that most of the office buildings are controlled by landlords that intend to hold them long term.
What else are you seeing from the investment side of things? How we were disproportionate in comparison to the national trend. I wonder if you could delve a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, I mentioned that 7%, sales were down 7% nationally for total investment sales. With the exception of industrial, all the other categories were down pretty significantly. And the reason for that is because of what has happened on the coast, not only with institutional money, but money coming in, foreign investors. And the top three categories are Asia, Europe, and Canada. And they come into those markets and they're willing to pay very high prices to be on the coast. But that's pushing the other investors down, and I think we talked about this last year, down to the secondary markets, but it's even further driving the investors to the tertiary markets, such as Des Moines. And we see family office groups, high net worth individuals are the primary and private investors that are coming in and looking at our market. And that it's a positive for us, but that's part of the reason why the sales have gone down nationally overall.
What type of effects do you think that would have here locally? Is that trend? Do you expect that trend to continue into this coming year?
Yes, we see it going on for indefinitely. The biggest challenge that we've had, and we seem to always have that, is we just don't have enough product to meet the demand. Now, as things change in our marketplace, as there's not the same kind of rent growth that we've seen in various categories, we may see some owners that will decide that it really is time to sell. We have not seen an impact on cap rates yet. Frankly, in 2017, we saw about 100 basis points spread in office, retail, and industrial, and with multifamily, it was about 150 basis points. In the past, it's usually been 150 to 200 basis points. But I think what we're seeing now is these investors that are coming in, they're willing to pay a higher price. And we think that that's going to continue. The challenge for owners is, do I sell now? And if I do, what am I going to do with my money? And that's, where am I going to reinvest it? So that will continue to impact our marketplace.
You mentioned a little bit about what type of investors. Are some of the international folks looking at Des Moines as well, or is that still staying mostly on the coast?
It's still staying mostly on the coast in secondary markets. I mean, we've had some Canadians that have come in, but nothing like they're experiencing in other parts of the country. But we're no longer competing with the Minneapolis, the Kansas City, and the Chicago. I mean, their cap rates and their prices are considerably more than in our market. So people can just get a better yield here, and that's what we're looking for.
I think one thing to point out on those too is historically, kind of talking about the office market, historically, we haven't had a lot of rent growth in the office market, and I think, and Bill can maybe touch on this as well, is I'm starting to see more and more often where there's annual rent bumps in leases. So when they look at Des Moines and say, okay, I get an 8% cap rate in Des Moines with little to no rent growth, but I'm looking at a 5.5% return in a top tier market, now an advantage for us is we're starting to see some of that rent growth, and that's going to become more and more important as interest rates continue to rise and you get that hedge on inflation a little bit, that you've got some rent growth in there.
It used to be just 1%, and now I think 2%. I'd call it a standard now. 2% is probably an annual standard.
The other comment that I'll make about our 30% increase in 2017 in investment sales, two of those categories, one being multifamily, there was one sale that was almost $35 million. So that really skewed our typical numbers. In addition to that, we had 4 other sales that were in $11 to $16 million range. We've not seen those size of transactions and that many in one given year. In addition to that, on the industrial side, that number was up 25%. And the reason for that, it was up 40%. The multifamily was up 75% over the previous year. But with the industrial, it was the same situation. There were a number of transactions that took place in $11 to $16 million range that really skewed those numbers as well. Will that happen again next year or this year? Who knows?
You each have an opportunity, of course, to be watching what's happening, maybe from a national level. I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about maybe a trend that we might be talking about as the year goes on, or something that could be coming up that maybe we aren't talking about quite yet.
I think there's some hot markets outside of Des Moines in our state. I think that Linda talks about these outside investors that have come in and compressed cap rates, which have stabilized now, in my opinion. But a lot of these guys have come in and been competing in Des Moines, these little region institutional and the private money these guys are trying to buy, whether it's retail or multifamily or whatever it is, are looking to tertiary markets within our state. They're looking at the Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, other strong growth areas. I mean, our state unemployment rate compared to the national average is lower than everywhere else. These other communities also have strong job growth, so I think we'll see a trend of some of these folks looking, saying, okay, Des Moines is too competitive, we're going to go to Waterloo, Cedar Falls, or Cedar Rapids, or somewhere else, and try to make a play there. So that's something that I'm watching and paying attention
I think on the retail side, it's been estimated there will be about another 10,000 stores that will close this year. And when you look at that, we'll have some of that in the big box space, and we've talked about that before. And I found this very interesting that Kohl's, they need to do some downsizing, and what they have done is they have partnered with Aldi's to take up part of their excess space, and they're doing this in 10 different store locations, just as a pilot to see how it works. And part of what prompted them to do that, not only because they need to downsize and cover some part of their cost by having Aldi's in the store, but Amazon buying Whole Foods really triggered that with Aldi's and wanting to get into a different distribution network. So that we may see that with other retailers, and they already have other partners lined up. If this works, then they're going to really go out into the market.
I would say the one thing that was the biggest threat to retail over the past 10 years was technology and the online shopping. And I think that's going to be the one thing that they need to really, brick and mortar really need to embrace. And you're seeing it a little bit where you can walk into a store now and they'll have, they have a customer file on database. They know what colors you like, what styles you like, what fashions you like. They have apps that will actually take a photo of you and custom tailor a suit or a shirt for you just with that photo. So again, embracing that technology and making that customer experience something above and beyond what they're used to is how they're going to get those customers back into the store.
Will you say anything interesting about that?
I just think in the office side, the biggest trend you're going to see is you're going to see owners of second generation spaces continue to, and I mentioned this earlier, continue to reinvest in their buildings and try to find certain amenities that maybe might be a little bit different than what the landlord next door is offering. And I think they're just going to try to find ways to differentiate their space.
I'll give you guys each we're just about at the end here, and I just want to give you each a chance to, a number of topics we could keep going into. I wonder if there's something we haven't talked about yet that you think we should have talked about. Kyle?
A couple of things one thing on the multifamily front that I failed to mention, you asked it earlier, and I'll just touch on it quickly, is as this supply arrives to the marketplace, operations by owners are going to be critical. Ability to manage the property well, to have very high quality tenant interaction, communication, be in front of the amenity packages that the tenants want are going to be very critical in maximizing your return on multifamily investment. From a long-term perspective, I'd really like to look at things, trends 5-10 years out in the future, and it really gets very interesting when you start to factor in things like robotics, artificial intelligence, the digital revolution that we're going to be seeing over the next 10 years is really going to change the way we occupy office space. It's going to change the way our goods are distributed to us, change the way the retailer does business. Take a look at the trifecta of Amazon, your cell phone, and the internet, how that changes retail now and into the future will be a fantastic thing to watch. And in the experience of the occupier of multifamily units, it will be critical to stay in front of the design of these units. How people live today is going to change dramatically how they live in the future. So products have to be designed around those new trends. And I could talk for hours about this kind of stuff. And you start to wrap your mind around it, you're like, oh.
We'll get you a couple drinks out there.
Yeah, regarding apartments, should I take my shirt off?
I Said after we get the drinks.
Regarding apartments, we're gonna, as we mentioned already, we're gonna see the supply side start to slow down over the next couple of years. In the immediate future, there are some pockets of concern. Downtowns, one of those big concerns. The western suburbs, 40% of the units coming online this year are in the western suburbs. And so there's some pockets to watch where we're gonna have some downward pressure on rents for the first time in 6-7 years. I think we're going to see that along with the concessions. I think more so in the downtown market than we are in the western suburbs, but nonetheless still downward pressure on rents. I wouldn't. We don't have an apocalyptic situation where multifamily is scary and crazy. We still have people that want to buy it, but I think that downtown is really a big concern from people, the new construction stuff, hitting their performas. I think cap rates on the appraisals and some of those things are probably a little bit skewed, and with a little downward pressure on rents, what kind of opportunities might arise out of that situation.
You're wondering where we're at in the cycle, and nobody really knows how to answer that. About 64% of people that have been polled think that we are at the end of the cycle. 34% think that we're in the middle of the cycle. We have had, and I know many of you know this, we've had since January, as of January, we've had 102 consecutive years, or months of economic growth, and which is the third longest period since World War II. And in 1991 and 2001, it was 120 months. And another fact that a lot of people don't know, so are we getting close to it, or can we go a little bit further? Australia has had 27 years of continuous growth, which is phenomenal. Is that going to happen here? Probably not. The things that we need to be concerned about are the risks that could happen, and it could be geopolitical, it could be interest rates going up much faster than what we're anticipating, inflation. There are just a number of different things that could, trade wars, that could change the dynamics of our cycle that we're in.
To piggyback on that a little bit, I do think there's so much supporting data with the strong job growth, the strong wages, unemployment being low, a lot of those things that are supporting the current cycle. But I think there are a lot of headwinds that we need to be aware of too, with inflation, with interest rate. I don't think, barring a 9/11 type of a situation, I don't see any drastic change happening in the near term. But I do feel, I guess I would be in that 65% that feels that we are at the top of that cycle. One other thing, I guess, from a retail perspective that I would probably keep an eye on, I touched on it just briefly with Jordan Creek, but we're going to see some shifting in our malls, and I would throw Prairie Crossing and Altoona shops in that mix as well. They're sitting about 75% occupied. To see how well that continues to grow. I know they've got several more shops that are going to be being announced, but see how that's received by the market. And then, as I mentioned, Jordan Creek and a new entertainment use that they're courting right now, that I think we'll probably see what comes of that will be a big win for them out there. Von Mauer obviously was a huge win for them out there. So then the question bears, what happens with Valley West Mall? What happens with that Von Mauer? I think that ownership group is aware of what's happening out there. I think they are ready to make some investment, but it's definitely needed in order for that mall to continue to thrive.
Last thought?
In terms of something that maybe we haven't touched on, those industrial brokers in our office, they're going to cringe when they hear me talking industrial. But what I think is really interesting is our industrial market in Des Moines has seen real growth. I mean, a lot of new construction, new projects planned. There's been a lot of growth. And what's interesting is, we touched on earlier, e-commerce. And I believe fourth quarter, I'm probably going to get the number wrong, it was about 9.1% was of all commerce, of all retail sales was e-commerce. What's interesting is the impact that it's had on the retail market, which is, again, what Tyler said, the bricks and mortar, the stores, the footprints are getting smaller. But on the other hand, what it's done is it's really been a catalyst in our industrial market, as we're seeing a lot of these retailers and distributors open up, high-cube warehouse locations. And Des Moines going to get their fair share. I've always thought Des Moines, to me, it seems like we're ideal at the crossroads of 80 and 35, and I think we're just going to see that industrial base in Des Moines, in my opinion, just keep growing and growing. And to the detriment of retail, I think it's part of that's going to spill over into the industrial market.
Kyle? Well, close us out.
To piggyback on what you said, Bill, we're seeing buildings that are being built in sizes that we haven't seen before. So, R&R's delivered a 250,000 square foot distribution center recently. They just announced plans for a 300,000 square foot distribution center. Opus has got 200 under construction. We haven't seen speculative construction of that size in our marketplace. Graham Group has got 237 under construction, and they have a pad site ready for a 675,000 square foot distribution center. So this is a product type that we have not seen in our marketplace, and it's largely due to this third-party logistics groups that are part of this distribution chain, the supply chain that we're in right now, and we don't see that slowing down. As I mentioned before, it's transportation costs that's the big driver in industrial. Being at the intersection of 80-35 is a big advantage for Central Iowa.
I think that'll do it for us today. The bar is open.
Yes, just one, let me thank a couple folks here. Thank you, Chris, thank the panelists. I'd also like to thank Franson and Associates, Ted Franson and Joe Coffey for preparing the commercial sector reports. I'd like to thank Commercial Appraisers of Iowa, Russ Modernock and Pat Schulte for the data contained in the multifamily report. And also a big thank you to Lauren Brown and Suzanne Muntz, who helped us put together this program and the survey. So thanks everyone. And thank you everyone for being here. We appreciate it. Cocktail and hors d'oeuvres are right out in the reception area.